From the outside, my life looked perfect. From the inside, I was slowly disappearing. There's a particular kind of silence you learn to carry in your chest when everything is fine. A silence that sits just behind your sternum, where the breath should feel warm and alive. Mine felt like glass, quiet, polished, breakable. I used to sit at my kitchen island, white quartz, single vase with eucalyptus, pendant lights that came on automatically, and tell myself that this was all I had ever wanted. The smart speaker would brighten the room at 6:30 a.m. The coffee machine would hiss, and I would watch the steam rise like a promise. And still, the second I'd lift the cup, something inside me would sink. Breath. I didn't say this out loud. I smiled in photos. I said, busy, when people asked how I was. And I ordered the special at restaurants with the confidence of a person who knew where her life was going. But the truth is that I was losing myself by degrees so small you couldn't measure them until, suddenly, the tape ran out, and there was nothing but the click of the reel. If you're listening to this, maybe you know that sound. Maybe you know what it is to have a life that looks like a glossy brochure and feels like a waiting room. I did all the right things. I earned the degree, then a second one, because optional always sounded like opportunity. I moved to the city, clean lines, big windows, trams humming in the rain, and took a job that made my parents proud and my LinkedIn sparkle. Product launches, internal all hands, quarterly goals I learned to recite like a liturgy. I was promoted twice in 3 years. She's a star, someone said in a meeting as if I wasn't there, and I smiled so hard my cheeks shook. I dated the kind of person who looked good on paper. Funny when he had energy, ambitious when he had sleep. We took trips that had the soft blue of travel magazine spreads. A weekend in Lisbon where we ate custard tarts under a tarp during a sudden rainstorm. A week in Crete where the water was clear enough to punish you with its honesty. A December escape to an almost empty alpine town where we pretended the silence was romantic and not a forecast. Our apartment, this smart one, knew our habits better than we knew each other. Lights warmed toward amber around 9. The thermostat exhaled into comfort. The robot vacuum hummed its polite figure eights, and the blinds descended like a stage curtain. I posted a photo once, late light, a glass of wine, my feet on the couch, and the comments were a chorus. Goals. Living the dream. Teach me your ways. I kept receipts for everything. Museum stubs, restaurant cards, plane tickets folded into corners of journals I never finished. They were the crumbs I laid down to prove I'd been walking through the forest, even as I forgot where I was going. The company sent me to conferences. Name badge, lanyard, coffee in heavy cardboard cups that cooled too fast. I learned to project my voice just past the front row and to gesture like someone who believed in the bar charts on the screen. People took notes when I spoke. I put speaker in my bio and pretended it was a label and not a costume. On Sundays, I meal prepped in containers that nested like Russian dolls. On Mondays, I woke to a slate of meetings. On Tuesdays, I worked late and called it momentum. On Wednesdays, I reminded myself to be grateful. On Thursdays, I agreed to a dinner I didn't want. And on Fridays, I posted a photo of a skyline at sunset with a caption about earned rest. Saturdays were for errands that proved I had a life. And Saturday nights were for places where the music pushed the words around until we could no longer hear ourselves. There was nothing wrong. That was the problem. It started as a hairline crack. A thin line across the glaze of a morning that should have shone. I'd stand at the mirror brushing my teeth, and my eyes would slide past my face into some middle distance, like a commuter watching towns go by. I laughed at parties, and I cried brushing my teeth. In meetings, my mouth moved before my mind did. I learned to say things that sounded like progress. Let's circle back. Let's put a pin in it. I have thoughts on that. I always had thoughts. What I didn't have were feelings I could trust. Everything felt like it was happening 1 inch to the left of me. I kept a list on my phone called Things I Like. It had 3 items: thunderstorms, late afternoon coffee, and hot bread with butter. I added tall trees and the smell of old bookstores and taking my shoes off after a long day, just to make it look less embarrassing. One night, bent over the glow, I realized most of my likes were textures, sensations, things that happened to me. I couldn't name a thing I wanted. I watched couples across restaurant tables and saw the choreography, the shared plate, the reheated anecdote, the predictable tenderness that arrives precisely when the server does. I tried to feel envy the way I had at 22, when the right hand on a wrist could send electricity to my ribs. Instead, I felt like I had the sound turned off. Sometimes I would stay late at the office and walk the empty hallways just to hear my shoes echo. It was proof that I took up space, that I wasn't just a moving shadow. The vending machine made a friendly thunk that I came to love. A bag of almonds would stutter down the track, and I would think, there, that's cause and effect. At home, I sat on the floor and organized my life into containers. Batteries, cables, spare keys, adapters for devices I didn't own anymore. It felt like control. It felt like arranging the bones of a creature no one could name. Friends texted me with gossip, then with updates about engagements, babies, moves. I sent confetti emojis and heart reactions and told myself that joy is joy even when borrowed. After a while, my responses turned into a stack of unread blue dots on their phones. The invitations slowed. I told myself this was ease and not erosion. My partner started sleeping with his phone under his pillow. I started sleeping facing the wall. He asked if I was okay, and I said, just tired. He nodded, as if this explained the way I had been misplacing myself. The city pulsed. I pressed my fingers to my wrist and waited to feel the same. Insomnia arrived like an old friend who never knocks. At first, it sat quiet in the corner of my room, content to watch me swallow melatonin and rearrange the pillows. Then it stood over me at 3:11 a.m. every night, naming the things I couldn't. It used my voice. It said, "Are you sure this is your life?" Burnout is sneaky. It doesn't look like collapse. It looks like competence in a body made of stone. I answered emails with the efficiency of a metronome. I said yes to things I didn't remember agreeing to. I went to a coworker's birthday gathering and told a joke so well that a stranger touched my arm and said, "You're a riot." I felt nothing. I laughed a second too late. I faked laughter. I faked surprise. I faked appetite. I went running not because I wanted to, but because I knew how to put on shoes. There were cracks. Small scenes I remember with humiliating clarity. Standing in a supermarket holding a jar of pasta sauce and staring at the label as if it were a map. Sitting on a tram as it paused between stations and feeling so outside my body that I had to wriggle my toes to prove I was still in it. Dropping my phone and watching the spiderweb crack snake from the corner, a mirror of the line I had been trying to ignore across my days. One night, my partner asked me what I would do if I could do anything. The question was generous. It also felt like someone opening every window in January. I don't know, I said. We sat with that for a long time, two people in a warm apartment, wearing sweaters, looking at a horizon we couldn't name. What if this isn't my life? What if I'm living someone else's dream? The thought arrived and stayed. It didn't argue or threaten. It simply took off its coat and sat down on the couch, familiar as family. I kept moving around it, refilling my glass, pausing the show for a bathroom break, brushing my teeth with a little too much force. It stayed. There wasn't one spectacular event. No dramatic betrayal, no cinematic car crash. It was a Tuesday in late autumn when the dark comes early and the city smells like smoke and wet wool. I was in the bathroom, late, the mirror fogging. I raised the hairdryer to my head and turned it on, and the lights in the smart apartment flickered. I don't know why that mattered. But something about that flicker, control meeting its limit, the system revealing its glitch, made me look up too quickly. My eyes met mine, and for one breathless second, I didn't recognize the person looking back. Who even is that? Who even is that? I put the hairdryer down on the counter. It rolled once and settled. My chest went tight, like an elevator that stops between floors. I sat on the closed toilet seat because my knees suddenly felt arranged incorrectly. The apartment was quiet except for the dryer's cooling metal tick. Water gathered at the edge of the counter and dripped, patient as lace. Panic attacks aren't always loud. Sometimes they are breath leaving without permission. Sometimes they are an elastic band around the brain. I tried to breathe, in for 4, out for 6, like the article said. My mouth couldn't count. Tears came like the body knows what to do when the mind refuses. I texted a friend, then deleted it. I texted my partner in the other room. I'm okay. It was both a lie and a plea. He came to the doorway and leaned against it slowly, the way you approach a skittish animal. Talk to me, he said. But there was nothing to say. Language had left the building. We broke up 2 weeks later. Not because of the bathroom, or the hairdryer, or the panic. Because we had become two people who loved the idea of each other more than the person standing there, breathing. The night he packed a small bag. Just a few things, he said. Just a while. We'll talk. I watched him fold a sweater and felt the strangest relief, like loosening a tight shoe. The relief hurt. He kissed my hair, and I smelled his shampoo, the one I always bought because I knew which aisle it was on. The door closed softly. The apartment swallowed the sound. Nothing mattered. Not in the nihilistic sense, not as a worldview. Just as a fact, nothing had weight. I went to work and moved my hands and smiled, and watched my email compose itself. I stared at my reflection in the elevator door and practiced different versions of my face. None of them were mine. I started to leave my phone on airplane mode for hours at a time, like a person stepping out of her own orbit to see if the Earth still spun. It did. I did the things you were supposed to do when your life starts to feel like a haircut you never wanted. I booked a solo trip to the coast in the off-season, a small town where the shops close by 6 and dogs are allowed on the beach. The Airbnb smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and damp wool. The owner had left a note in careful script. Help yourself to the tea. I made a mug and watched the sea. The water did its ancient work, pulling and offering, pulling and offering. I waited for clarity to uncurl like steam. Breath. I walked until my calves sang. I deleted social media, then downloaded it again, then deleted it once more and put the phone in a drawer. I took photos of my feet on sand, my hand in a pocket, a gull lifting like a prayer I couldn't say. I didn't post them. The not posting felt like a small rebellion, and also like carrying a beautiful secret that did not change me. Back home, I drafted a resignation letter and saved it as door. I spent a weekend not speaking to anyone. I watched a movie in the afternoon, then watched the light move across the floor, then watched the kettle not boil because I kept forgetting to turn it on. I went 3 days without wearing real pants. I purged my closet. Bags for donation lined the hallway like soft passengers waiting for a train. I held a silk blouse that had traveled to 3 countries and felt as if I were underdressed for my own existence. Into the bag it went. I kept a sweater with one loose thread because when I wore it, I could put my finger through the opening and remember that some things are allowed to be undone. I told my manager I needed time. Take a week, she said. I said, I think I need more than that. Silence on the call, then the careful company voice. We support you. I closed my laptop and touched the lid like the hood of a car that had carried me through a storm. Here is the part they don't put on self-help covers. Escape doesn't fix it if the life you're escaping from lives inside you. The beach was beautiful, and my room was clean, and the nights were quiet in a way cities can't understand. And still, when I woke, the first feeling was not relief. It was absence, emptiness, but in a different location. People imagine rock bottom as sirens or hospital lights or some cinematic scream that makes the neighbors talk. Mine was softer. It was a Tuesday again. It was me sitting on the floor of my kitchen at 11:23 a.m., eating dry cereal from the box because the milk had gone sour. The robot vacuum bumped my heel and kept apologizing in polite circles. I turned it off, and the room went so quiet I could hear the distant elevator cables hum. I stopped feeling angry. Then I stopped feeling sad. Then I stopped feeling it all. I became a person made of workarounds. I learned where to stand in the shower so the hot water would feel like sensation instead of proof of life. I timed my grocery trips for the hour when the store was emptiest and the fluorescent lights felt least like interrogation. I set reminders to drink water and felt proud when the glass was empty, as if my body were a houseplant I was trying not to kill. I did not think about the future because it made the room tilt. I thought about the next hour and how to move my body across it without scaring myself. I thought about sleep the way one thinks about a boat leaving shore without you. People texted. I didn't answer. My mother left a voicemail arranging her sentences like fragile cups. I played it twice and then deleted it because I couldn't carry the sweetness without spilling. A friend sent a photo of her baby holding a spoon like a flag. I stared at the tiny fist and felt tired in a place I didn't know a person could be tired. My plants wilted. I watered them and whispered, I'm trying. They perked up in a way that made me resent their resilience. I wished I could cry. Crying would have meant something was moving. But my face had become a polite room. The shift wasn't a trumpet blast. It was a dog. A very average dog. A yellowish mutt with eyes the color of strong tea, who belonged to my neighbor down the hall. The neighbor was elderly and wore cardigans and shades that made you think of autumn. His name was Mr. Kovacs, and I only knew it because it was on his mailbox. That morning, I had opened my door to put a bag of trash in the hall for a second while I put on shoes. The dog, her name, I would learn, was Honey, had slipped her leash as Mr. Kovacs wrestled with a stack of packages. She trotted straight into my apartment as if she'd lived there all along and sat down in the pool of light on my rug. Then she looked at me in a way that said, unmistakably, I have chosen you for this moment. Sorry, Mr. Kovacs said, breathless, appearing in my doorway. She's very friendly. We both stood there for a second, me in pajamas, him with a package under his arm, watching the dog place her head on my knee like an old photograph of tenderness. We used to have one, I heard myself say. We didn't. I don't know why I said it. Maybe I wanted history. Maybe I wanted to belong to a sentence that began with we used to. I bent and put my hand on Honey's warm head. And something happened that I can't describe with anything but the simplest words. I felt the feeling of my own hand. The weight of it. The pressure. The texture of fur. The way bodies are real even when minds are lost. Do you like dogs? He asked. It was the most ordinary question, and it opened a door I didn't know was still on its hinges. He needed someone to walk Honey in the afternoons because his knee had gone tricky, he said, which made me smile for the first time in a real way in months. I heard myself say yes. The first walk was clumsy. Honey pulled, and I apologized to everyone as if we were crashing a silent party. But the air had a little salt in it from a breeze coming off a distant river, and a child in a red coat pointed at a puddle and laughed, and my feet remembered how to go forward without consulting my resume. Honey found a stick the size of her self-respect and carried it with pride. A woman with a grocery bag nodded at me and said, she's a good one. I nodded back as if she had said, you're going to be okay, and we had both decided to believe it. When I returned Honey, Mr. Kovacs handed me a book as a thank you. Old, he said, as if warning me it might crumble. Inside the front cover, in pencil, someone had written, for the hour you need. I sat on my couch, opened it at random, and read a paragraph about learning to stay with discomfort without immediately solving it. It wasn't profound. It was permission. That night, I slept for 4 hours in a row. It felt like winning a small lottery. There was no miracle. Nothing parting. Nothing descending. Just the simple rhythm of tiny decisions made in daylight. I found a therapist who didn't promise to fix me in 6 sessions. The first time, I talked too fast, and then apologized for not knowing how to sit on the couch correctly, as if there were a correct way. She said, we can go slow. And something in my bones exhaled. We didn't start with solutions. We started with naming things without giving them a job. Grief, shame, tiredness, loneliness, the relief of relief, breath. I started walking Honey 3 afternoons a week. Eventually, Mr. Kovacs and I would sit on his stoop for 5 minutes afterward while Honey chewed her prize stick to splinters. He told me about a bakery across town that made a bread you had to wait in line for, and how the waiting made the butter taste like a reward. He told me he used to play the clarinet badly and still missed it. He didn't ask me questions I couldn't answer. We talked about the weather like it was a shared hobby. He laughed at my joke about the vampire hours I kept. Night shift for the mind, he said. I bought a cheap notebook that didn't intimidate me and set a timer for 10 minutes each morning. I wrote without stopping, even when it was nonsense. The rules were simple, hands moving, no editing. Most days, my handwriting looked like a small animal had run across the page. Some days, a sentence would arrive that made me feel like I had opened a window by accident. I am not a machine. I wrote once, and cried in a way that felt like thaw. I cooked things that took time, lentils that needed soaking, onions that needed patience until they melted into sweetness. The kitchen smelled alive again. I listened to the kettle this time, and when it sang, I answered. I told my manager I wasn't coming back at full speed. I can show up, I said, but I can't show up like that. To my surprise, she didn't fire me. We reworked my role until it fit like clothing that didn't pinch. I said no to a project that would have looked good at dinner parties. I learned to tolerate the discomfort of disappointing, invisible people. I let some friendships end without writing essays to explain their death. I kept others by being honest. I can't do loud tonight. I'd text. Or can we walk instead of sit? I spent time with a friend who speaks softly and insists there is no prize for pretending. We sat on her floor and painted pottery badly and cheered when the glaze made our mistakes look deliberate. On bad days, I did the simplest thing well. I watered the plants. I changed the sheets. I took a shower and let the water run across my face without making it a metaphor. I placed my hand on my chest and counted 10 warm breaths. On better days, I caught small moments and pocketed them like stones. The grayscale of the sky before rain, the way the barista wrote my name in a swooping hand and said see you tomorrow, like a spell, the sound of bicycle tires whispering on wet pavement, a message from my mother that said only thinking of you, which is its own entire theology. I thought a lot about the word belong. How I had tried to belong to a picture and to other people's expectations and to a version of myself assembled from praise. I started asking where I felt belonging in my body. The answer was never in a performance. It was on a walk, with a dog who knew more about presence than any book I'd read. It was in the quiet room after I closed the laptop. It was in a late afternoon kitchen where the sun found a way through, even on winter days. I did not become a different person. I became a person who could hear herself again. If you came here for triumph, I don't have it the way movies teach it. I don't have a montage where my life goes from grayscale to saturated color, where I cut my hair and run a marathon and launch a company that helps others find their passion. I have something smaller, and for me, truer. I have quiet mornings where I let the steam curl from my cup and I don't rush to fill the silence with a plan. I have work I can do without losing my name in it. I have a pair of shoes by the door with traces of dried mud from the path along the river, and a neighbor who knocks sometimes just to say, she's restless. Would you like to? I have my own hand, warm against my chest when the panic tries to return. I have the knowledge that feeling nothing was not proof that I was nothing, that numbness can be a body's last good trick to keep us safe, and that thaw takes longer than anyone wants to admit. Maybe happiness isn't loud. Maybe it isn't a stadium or a standing ovation or 1,000 hearts on a screen. Maybe happiness is the soft hum of a life you don't have to escape from. Maybe it's the kind of freedom that doesn't require a plane ticket, just permission to be as you are, without a performance. I lived the life everyone wanted. It glittered, it impressed, it photographed well. Inside it, I went missing. I don't want that life anymore. I want this one, the one that sometimes aches and sometimes sings and often does both in the same hour. The one where I can say, out loud, I don't know, and feel the relief of not needing to. The one where I can sit on a stoop with an old man and a dog and call that an excellent afternoon. If you're listening and you feel like a ghost in your own home, I can't tell you what to do. I can only say what I wish someone had told me. You are still in there. Even if the world applauds the version of you that's missing. Even if your mirrors learned another face. Even if the only thing you can do today is drink a glass of water and stand by a window for 5 minutes. That counts. You count. Maybe happiness isn't loud. Maybe it's just finally being okay being you.